Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Solid topic, let's do it. What's a real, scary, or unexplainable story that happened to your family? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When my mom was working on her PhD, she went to study in Argentina and Bolivia. When she was in La Quiesa, Argentina, very near the border with Bolivia, she met a guy from America who said he was a businessman. He was in town for a few days, and they talked about the country and its history, which interested them both. My mom, having studied the region's history, told him of a place on the Bolivian side of the river that was the border between Bolivia and Argentina. There were ancient burial sites in the cliffs next to the river, and because the cliff was eroding, you could see bones and burial artifacts in the side of the wall and in the water. He was very interested to go see, so my mom drew him a map of how to get there, and he left later that day. Then my mom started to dream about the man, but in the dream he was dead by the side of the path, with his head cut off. She dreamed this every night for a month. A month after the man left, she was brought into the police station and showed the map she had drawn for the American. When asked whether she had drawn it for him, she said yes, and asked if he was okay. The police told her that his body had been found across the river, right where she had marked the spot on the map where the burial sites were. He was badly decomposed and had been beheaded and left near the path up to the cliff. After some more examination, the police said they believed he was a drug smuggler and that he had been killed by one of his clients. My mom was released after she told them everything. She still can't explain why she had those dreams. My grandmother had a stillbirth. The night that she lost the baby, my grandpa was at home while she was at the hospital. He had woken up around 2 or 3 in the morning and looked up to see the devil standing at the foot of the bed. It didn't talk or say anything, but pointed at a cross they had hanging on the wall in the room. Later, when he told my grandmother what happened, they discovered that she had lost the baby around the same time as his encounter with the being. Another story that I can't quite fully remember, but my grandmother was looking for my grandpa late one night. She couldn't find him anywhere in the house, so she went to look outside. She saw him down the street and walked up to him. His back was to her, but he turned around, revealing glazed over eyes that had gone solid yellow. I don't remember exactly how the story ended, but I think she ran back to the house. He returned shortly after, eyes back to normal. I'm not sure if they acknowledged the incident or just ignored it. This was told to me a while ago. I'm a pretty skeptical person, but my grandma isn't one to lie, so I don't know if I believe this entirely, but I'm not just going to dismiss them outright. I thought they were interesting, and it gave me chills when I heard them. I may be skeptical to a few things as well, but signs are signs, and I've seen a few and felt a few, so maybe that was it. We drove 5 hours to my grandma's house without telling her that we were coming. When we got there, she had dinner prepared and the correct amount of plates on the table. Once I woke up in the middle of the night to classical music playing downstairs, so I walked downstairs, the music getting louder while still remaining faint, if you know what I mean. I get to the middle floor and it abruptly stops. I never found out what happened that night. When she was a teenager, my mom lived in a house where a bunch of freaky stuff happened. Once, she and my aunts and uncles were sitting around the living room watching TV when they all heard a ripping sound. They looked the direction where the sound was coming from and saw this thick canvas curtain slicing from top to bottom. There was nothing around it, and it didn't rip. It was a straight slice, like someone cut it. She also said stuff would just randomly fly around the house, like toys would shoot out from under furniture and stuff like that. Another time, she was home alone when she heard a loud, evil laugh coming from the TV that was off. She ran out of the house and spent all day across the street just waiting for the rest of the family to come back. During a citywide blackout, my younger brother decided to go out for a stroll because he liked the atmosphere. It had almost rained earlier, so the air was nice. With no streetlights or even moonlight for that matter, It was significantly darker, but not so much as to not see completely. As he's about halfway back home rounding a circular street, he sees something or someone out of the corner of his eye. He described it as a person, but skinny and white with no facial features. It also was not walking, but skipping towards his direction right across the street. My brother can't get a good look at it, and he also can't go the other way because he had to pass the person or thing in order to continue home. The creature steps and stops at a puddle before crossing the street. It then starts patting the puddle, as if it was playing with it like a child. My brother could hear it splashing as he slowly walked past it. His eyes kept it within visual range, but he never turned enough to make eye contact so as not to grab its attention, all the while acting as if he hadn't seen it. He passed the creature and continued walking calmly home while internally freaking out. He still heard the splashing. After thinking he was far enough away, he immediately sprinted all the way back home. He never looked back to see if it gave chase or stayed. Not super crazy or scary, but definitely a freaky encounter. TL, DR, bro encountered Slender Man's kid during a blackout. Baby Slender Man? Sure, why not? In the mid-80s, my mama worked at a school in a different class than me. I was in nursery. To get to the school, she always took a shortcut over the heath. About 2 weeks earlier, a local girl in her late teens, who my family vaguely knew, went missing. The last time someone saw her was over the heath. Mama said she wasn't that concerned by this, as she practically grew up over there. It was summer in the middle of the day, and the route she took was quite busy with other people walking their dogs and golf balling. One day, Mama set off. Halfway to school, she stopped thinking she was being stared at, and she looked over her shoulder, and at the top of the small hill she just walked down was a big tall man in biker's leathers and helmet. She said she couldn't see his face, but she had this uneasy feeling that he had been watching her for some time. She said it was funny because she hadn't seen him coming down the hill, but there was a heavily wooded area opposite the hill, and Mama said she thought he might have walked through there. That would explain why she hadn't seen him before. Mama said she felt uneasy by his stillness and interest, so she walked a little faster, and soon there was a healthy distance between her and the stranger. On the way home later that day, she decided to get the bus home instead of walking. A week later, the body of a teenage girl was discovered by a dog walker in the same wooded area opposite the hill where the stranger biker man had been watching Mama. There was a police search, and they appealed for information and witnesses. Mama contacted them and made a statement, telling them about the mystery man on the hill. The police never did solve the murder of the poor local girl, and Mama never walked that way to work again. Someone killed my father's oldest brother on purpose when he was a newborn, and since they were living in a village where everyone knows each other, some women came for a visit around nighttime to not leave my grandma alone. Grandpa was in somewhere. Because it was dark and there was no electricity in there, one of the women dropped some dirt through his throat, and as a result, because they didn't let him cry or make any kind of noise, he was found dead the next morning. My grandmother was a Russian German whose family lived in a German settlement at the Volga River until the Second World War, at which time she was around 10 years old. When the Wehrmacht attacked the Soviet Union, 10 of her family of 12 were tortured and killed by the socialists for no other reason than being German. She and her 15-year-old brother had to flee the socialists over the whole of the Balkan, but were found and deported to Kazakhstan, but not before they were put to work in a labor camp in Siberia. Hunger, cannibalism, children dying from exhaustion from hard labor, She's seen it all. My mom is a magnet of little unexplainable experiences, but one of my favorites is this. She was at a quinceañera, a Mexican 15th birthday party, sitting at a table. Then she saw on her peripheral view something moving on the table. She turned her head and saw a napkin folded like a little ghost that suddenly stopped dancing. She looked up and saw a little girl making the napkin dance, without touching it. Now, very serious and still, my mom asked the girl to do this, but she was so nervous she didn't want to. Flash forward to several years later. My mom was talking to a doctor, a colleague of hers. He said that he was working on a rural town in Mexico. They barely have roads or electricity. And there was this old man who basically was the spiritual leader of the town, like a shaman or a brujo, a warlock. And he did a lot of unexplained stuff, including making pieces of cloth and napkins dance. Now, there's various ways to make napkins dance. It is common magic trick. Common threads and puppeteering can do the trick. But the context in which my mom found this act is very odd. I'm skeptical. I don't believe in the paranormal, but I like to imagine that was something magical going on. Long story short, encounter my mom and his friend had people who can't make napkins dance without touching them. My aunt has lived in her current home for 20 years. The basement isn't really used, but it has 2 rooms down there and a bathroom. A couple of years ago, she was cleaning the place up since my grandparents were going to start living in one of the rooms. She, I guess, somehow or for some reason, decided to take down this small wall, about the size of a closet. Once she took it down, she saw this candle lit in the middle of this little room. Not really a room, kind of the size of a pantry room. Too small to really have anything in there. Anyway, there was a candle lit there, in the middle of the floor, and she immediately threw it away and had someone replace the wall or something. How is a candle supposed to be lit on when there's no way no one could have put it there, other than breaking the wall? My uncle grew up in Kemper County, Mississippi. His grandmother, Meemaw, told him stories of the Kemper County creature. These stories were a blend of real word-of-mouth accounts and the old Choctaw legends. One night, long after Meemaw had passed away, my uncle was sitting in the back bedroom of her cabin, reading. He was leaning with his back against the wall, with a window over his shoulder, a bit higher than head height. His dog, a big boxer, was laying on the floor. Sitting there, my uncle heard something big brush up against the cabin on the other side of the wall. He looked up and saw the boxer staring at the window. The dog's ears were forward, its eyes were big as saucers. But he was absolutely silent. He didn't bark, he didn't whine, he just stared. My uncle absolutely could not bring himself to turn and look out the window. So, they sat there for some length of time. It seemed to before the dog finally calmed down and my uncle was able to breathe easy himself. This other time, I was around 6 at the time. We used to live in a huge house and my family lived with my uncle's family in it. We took a picture in the upstairs living room. Again, maybe not a living room. I'm not sure what to call it, but it was big enough to be one. There was this curtain behind us, and we had these sliding glass doors behind us as well, meaning the sun was behind us, and we could see everything clear. One of my aunts took the photo of all of us, and once we took a look, we saw that there was a bunch of black hair hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the room. Really long, thick hair, almost reaching the floor. I overheard them talking about it, and they decided to burn it, and we instead took another one outside. This isn't that scary, but there was one time I had gone over to my friend's house. It wasn't late at all, and I was only staying for about an hour because I was at an open house night at my school. She doesn't live in a neighborhood. She lives alone with her parents. We were probably 10, and her sister. Her sister was at a friend's, and her parents were having some work done outside, so we were the only ones inside. We sat under her window watching YouTube for like 20 minutes, when all of a sudden, we heard a sound. She had a small TV in her room that had a slot for VCR tapes. Her lamp started flickering, and a VCR tape shot out of the TV. Later, she told me this was normal, but being kids, we pretended to be scared. Lightning flashed outside, and rain started bucketing down. Her parents came in to grab raincoats and ask if we were okay. We said yes, and they went outside. After a little more YouTube, we heard another sound. We opened her bedroom door and slipped out, flashlights in hand. We crept down the hall to her stepdad, into her room. We saw outside the window a figure. They wore their raincoat down over their face, but holy shit. They were staring up at us. Our hearts lurched. They'd seen us. We couldn't tell how tall they were, gender, or race, but we were terrified. We saw her parents a distance off, completely unaware. We dropped down below the window, gripping each other as tightly as we could. After a few heartbeats, we peeked over the window to see if they were still there. They took off running into the storm. When they reached the trees, they were gone. We slumped over and looked at each other. I asked her if she knew who it was, and she said no. That was one of the scariest times of my life. When I was about 11, I woke up one night after having a dream about a family photo that didn't exist, but along with everyone I knew, there were people in it who I didn't recognize. My mom was passing my room, so I asked if we had any family that I didn't know about. She looks at me in utter shock for a moment, then sits on my bed and tells me about my auntie. Turns out, my nan was originally married to an RAF pilot and pregnant with his daughter. He was shot down in World War II before she was born, and my nan remarried before she was old enough to. Understand, 18 years and 4 siblings later, my mom, being the youngest, my grandparents decided to tell her about her real father. Didn't go down well, and she moved out shortly after. No one ever spoke about her due to being upsetting for my nan, and my mom hadn't seen her for 15 years at that point. She'd been waiting until I was old enough to understand before telling me, in case casually or someone said anything in front of my nan, but she was really freaked out that I'd asked so specifically. Kinda creeped at the time.